Morning, everyone. Welcome to the Modern Market. This is our daily show from Monday to Friday at 7 a.m. Eastern Time, 12 p.m. BST, every day of the week, where we discuss all things to do with the modern market. That is the crypto market, the NFT market, and how to make some and or a lot of money on the internet. I'm your host, Bchek. I'm joined by my legendary co-hosts, Legendary and Sammy. Today, we've got a very special guest with us. We've got CEO of NFTfi, Stephen Young, with us. Cannot wait to get into a bigger discussion on NFT lending, where the alpha is there, some of the origin story of NFTfi itself. Stephen, how are you doing, my friend? Great to have you with us on the show today. You're also going to be with us to get into all of the headlines as usual. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. I'm a big fan of the show, so it's really cool to be here.
Awesome. Cannot wait to get into it in just a little bit. As usual, just so people know, we've got the normal show lined up. We're going to hit the headlines in just a little bit. We're going to get into a bigger discussion on it. And as I said, we're going to get into some NFTfi, NFT lending alpha as well. But before we get there, just a reminder, friends, nothing that we say here is financial advice. This modern market is exceptionally risky. We do not know anything for sure. So please do proceed with caution and exercise your own judgment. With that out of the way, Legendary, it is Wednesday. It is the 5th of June. How are you doing? How are you feeling?
GM, it's now 2 days in a row that I'm in an excellent mood. Afraid this will continue until next week, until I'm back to London. So you will have to just deal with it. But today there is actually a reason for that, and that's definitely looking at CoinMarketCap and seeing BNB above $700. I know one of the currencies that's not talked about on the timeline as much. We talk about it on the show quite a lot, or quite a lot is an exaggeration, but maybe more than
talk about it.
We talk about
more than other people.
Yeah, that's true. So that's quite exciting to see, but we'll definitely get into that a bit later since it's one of the main headlines.
I think your happiness cannot be attributed to CoinMarketCap. I think it can be attributed to Blast Gold. This is how your mood is currently tracking. This is what I've noticed. I'm pretty good at sensing when you're happy, and it usually is when a big inflow of gold has come in. I saw you tweet about your insert allocation. Do you want to share what happened there?
Yeah, so what I did with Insert is basically this app. We had it on the show last week when I did this Blast deep dive, where you just spin and you can either win, mint tokens or a price that you're spinning for, whether it's a CryptoPunk, a PlayStation 5, etc. And as floor prices are moving and the price of ETH is moving, sometimes they have mispriced opportunities there, such as a 0.01 spin for 1 in 150 chance to win a Remilio, which was trading at 1.75 when that was the case, which made it an absolutely EV positive gamble. So what I ended up doing is I did chuck my entire ETH balance into that and to basically smooth out variance and spin away, and did go for 3 Remilios, 31 PlayStation 5s, where basically also an EV neutral gamble, and did rinse and repeat a couple times. Like I got my prices redeemed in ETH and I did chuck the balance in again and again, and walked away with 2.7K gold and a bit of ETH on top of it.
2.7K gold at current conservative estimates is what, like 15K roughly, right? Or more?
That's more conservative than NFT
Very
stats.
conservative.
Like it's 20K plus according to NFT stats' estimates.
And you got 30 PlayStation 5s, should you wish to.
They were redeemed for ETH. I was very happy that I didn't have to accept physical shipment for those.
That's pretty fun. That's very, very fun. That's a cool story. Sammy, how are you doing, my man? Any PlayStation 5s on your side? What have you been up to?
No PlayStation 5s. However, I did try and get one at a discount from Legendary, but no luck there. And I think it's good that he could redeem it for ETH, because otherwise you're going to have a full-blown LAN party going on there.
I was going to say, maybe we could have done some OTC PlayStation 5s. Legendary is just like inundated with supply. So
exactly, the PlayStation broker.
Okay.
But yeah, no, there's definitely a few things in the pipeline as well. I think we got Blast Pepe's today as well.
Yeah.
Which is one of the first 404 collections on Blast. And then the Cambria snapshot as well. So you could see me happy tomorrow, depending on how that goes. So.
Okay, fair enough. Stephen, coming back to you here, how are you feeling about the market at the moment? Like people seem to be like pretty positive that the numbers is high, but I feel like there's this broad anxiety across the board that like, why are we not higher sooner? Why have we not made as much money? Have you noticed that? I know that you've been in the market for a very long time, specifically the NFT markets, right since the beginning in 2021 at least. What's your kind of read of the market at the moment?
I think we're all suffering from a bit of PTSD from the last couple of years. So I think there's good news, but I think everybody's little bit hesitant to actually fully believe it because we've been punched in the face so much over the last 18 months. But I mean, I think, if you think about where we were in 2019 at this stage of the cycle, maybe this was like start 2020, really. I mean, NFTfi just launched in April 2020. Like, we were $200 Ether. You could buy a CryptoPunk for 1.5 Ether.
Wow.
You could buy a Autoglyph for 2.5 Ether. Apes didn't exist. So I think sometimes it's just it's good to just remember where we are and keep it in perspective. We're like at all-time highs way earlier than we usually are. So I think people are just a little bit PTSD and like we're hoping for it up only a little bit early in the cycle. But I'm generally positive. I think we're in a good space right now. I think especially I think art's probably kind of bottoming now on the NFT side. I think we should maybe chop around a little bit for a while, but yeah, I think I'm pretty bullish.
Interesting. Like the idea of art potentially bottoming. I'm a big fan of the art stuff, and it's been kind of hard to see some of that stuff like really, really struggle more than other sectors potentially. But hopefully we see some turnaround there too. We're going to get into a bigger discussion as always on all the headlines and everything else in just a little bit, but let's hit the headlines first and get the updates on the headlines and the price action as always from the snapshot, which is pinned up top. If you do find it brings you some value today, please do give it a like. Let's get into it, starting with some price action. We have Bitcoin up 3% at 71k. We like to see that. ETH is up 1% at 3.8k. Solana is up 4% to $172. First headline, Bitcoin rallies past 71k, up almost 3% on the day, 5% on the week. Got some interesting analysis coming up on that a little later in the show in terms of open interest, funding, why that seems to be the case at the moment. Next, BNB reaches $700 and a $104 billion market cap, becoming the second major this cycle to hit all-time high. I bet that was not on people's radar to be the second major to hit all-time high, but we're going to discuss why that might be the case at the moment. We've spoken about BNB before on the show. A lot of people, I think, on the Western side of things kind of ignore it. Next, Mother hits $100 million market cap after Iggy continues the grind on crypto Twitter. Vitalik just wrote a post on what he thinks about celeb coins. We're going to get into a discussion on that in just a little bit. Getting into some NFT prices, we have CryptoPunks at 30 ETH, down 7%. Definitely continuing the slide. We saw some notable sales of CryptoPunks beneath 30 ETH for the first time in a while. Bored Apes at 12.6 ETH, Mutants at 2.1, down 5%, DGods at 1.2, Captains at 3.6, Azuki at 4, Penguins at 10.4, Mad Lads at 62 Solana, and the Nouns winning bid was at 4.7 ETH. Legendary, that is the price action. Those are the headlines. Anything catching your attention before we get into a bigger discussion today?
Yeah, absolutely. If I take a look at the Mintify heat map, there's like really one thing on the ETH side of things standing out to me, which is Overworld, the Incarnus, the PFP collection in that gaming ecosystem are down 25-ish% on the day. I did check and then asked in one of the groups for holders that I'm in. Apparently there was no snapshot or there was no announcement of tokenomics. So it just seems to be the case that there was a larger casual dump going on, but no particular reason. At least this is to the best of my knowledge.
Interesting. It's very, very rare, and I know this because I'm in the lending market. It's very, very rare when you have to know this when you're in the short-term lending market in particular. It's very, very rare for collections to move this fast, quickly in one day. Like typically it takes multiple days, and I know this because when you do short-term stuff on Blend, you get 24 hours to basically exit positions, and if you are 25%. Say you have a loan at 70 to 75% LTV, you feel relatively safe actually, because you would assume that this type of move doesn't necessarily happen in the space of just a few hours. So that's pretty aggressive. That's interesting to note. Fair enough. We don't have additional information there. Sammy, anything from your side? What's catching your attention in the market?
Yeah, I did notice this as well. And I think we've got it later in the snapshot, so we'll touch on it more deeply, but the Pirate Nation stuff, so proof of play, significant funding. They're up about 11% today as well. So my potential thoughts around that are you've got probably basically gamers moving in and out of potential projects, thinking, okay, well, this is a potential play. They just released their tokenomics. It's a really community-friendly potential airdrop. Therefore, I want to get more exposure to that. So you could see a readjustment of portfolios within from the gaming side. That's a potential thesis. It's hard to actually verify that without seeing where those individual funds or the significant size of those funds have moved from to, but that's a potential reason as to why this has gone. I think that kind of makes sense as a basic thesis. But on the Blast side, we've seen sort of a bit of a rebound on the Captain & Co ships and also the Crypto Valley characters. And I think this could potentially be with, I know some people are doing some analysis on what's the next jackpot win. Is it going to be an NFT? It's been tokens recently. Is it due? So there could be a readjustment of portfolios on this side. And I think that's something that I'll probably be watching quite closely. We saw quite a dump in the Captain & Co ships pricing yesterday, I think it was. And there's a lot of discussion in some of these Discord channels around, are they optimizing for maximizing their Blast Gold or are they kind of gaming the system a little bit too much? So there's a bit of back and forth between some various whales on the timeline and all those back channels as well, which is quite interesting. So yeah, I think those are probably the main points I've been looking at from both the Blast and the ETH side.
Interesting. It's funny you said, like, I can't remember what wording you said at the beginning, but you said something like, oh, there's been a bounce, and I went into the Blast section. For the people who are not watching in, remember, we're live on YouTube, we're live on X if you do ever want to see these segments in front of you. And all I could see is everything's down like 40%, 30%, 30% on the Blast side of things. But as you say, there are two things that are very green today. You've got Captain & Company and Crypto Valleys having a little bit of a bounce. So that's interesting to note. You mentioned Pirate Nation. One of the things we do on the show, Stephen, is we talk a lot about like tokenomics, figuring out like what makes sense in this very complex environment. Obviously, far more people are coming to market now than they have done in the past. And it's a kind of complex science to come up with like an appropriate way to kind of slice the token. Pirate Nation actually have done something quite interesting, which clearly the market likes anyway. It's gone up 10%. I'm just going to share their tokenomics, which is pretty interesting. They've gone for 47% to the community. And then the rest is like reasonable amounts to the team, investors, advisors. But I think this one was noted for like the quantity towards the community. Like how have you kind of observed teams so far? What do you think of this type of structure at the moment? And have you been observing much on the gaming side at all? Is that something that you look at?
Yeah, we're definitely watching the gaming space. It's a little bit tricky on the gaming assets, especially if you kind of want to use credit markets there, because it's so hard to know which game is going to hit. So you can have all of the coolest tokenomics, but if the game's not fun to play, the game's not fun to play, right? So and I think the bar for games nowadays is just so high. The big AAA title spending $250 million on a top tier game, it's difficult. So so for us at least, we can afford, we got a bit of luxury. We can wait and see, which things take off, and then we support that because until these assets have a history, they're not really collateral worthy. So but yes, I think gaming we're watching quite a lot. And then the other thing on the kind of tokenomic side, I think it's interesting. It's kind of, we went through this ICO phase back in the day where projects could mainly give to the community and sell directly to the community. And then kind of with the way that regulations have changed, that's become more and more difficult and kind of forced projects kind of down the route of taking VC funding and like doing token launches much later. So it's interesting kind of where we wash out in the end. Lots of bad things happening with ICOs at the time, but there's also certain things that I think probably is better for retail in the long run. So, like having the capability to do those things, it's got good sides and bad sides. So hopefully over the next few years, we kind of end up with something that's like more reasonable with like appropriate legislation.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point. It's interesting you brought up the ICO stuff, because one of the things we were speaking about on the show the other day is Kobe's article, which he published not too long ago, where he was kind of talking about like, look, I know a lot of bad things happened in the ICO phase, but there was like a meritocratic or democratic element to it. Whereas now increasingly a lot of the value gets captured privately, and there seems to be sometimes there is less left for the public markets. But as you say, ICOs are basically illegal in a bunch of places now. So there's that like balance that people need to try to strike in order to bring this stuff to market, which I think is completely fair enough. But you mentioned like being able to assess gaming assets at the moment. You've got the luxury of kind of picking which way you go. I think it might be interesting to just kind of go back to the inception of NFTfi and be like, well, what was actually the origin story? Why did you decide to create that company? And I think if I'm not incorrect, like it was one of the first companies that started providing liquidity for NFTs in that exact way. Do you want to just share kind of the story there?
Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah. So, sorry. So I got into crypto around 2016-ish. I actually lived in London in 2001, from 2001 to 2003. That was my first kind of real job, was working there. And then in 2014, I did a calculation and figured out that I was earning more in my first job in dollar terms than I was almost 15 years later, because I was earning in pounds, and then I was like earning in rands, and the rand purchasing power kind of just dropped through the floor. But my whole family was here. I loved the country. I wanted to stay here, but I didn't want to get trapped in the financial system. So basically,
for people who don't know where the rand is the currency of
South African. Yep, that's correct. And then so essentially I was looking for how do I stay here but move my financial assets out of this local economy. And that's actually how I discovered Bitcoin. So I was looking for a way to do that, found Bitcoin, started putting all my bonuses in there, and then obviously, as you guys all know, you're gonna get bitten by the bug, and then you just kind of keep going. So then so that was like 2016, and then 2018 I left to go full-time crypto. I was at exchange for a while, and then pretty soon realized that an exchange was just the same as a traditional financial institution, but instead of selling units or stocks, you're selling satoshis or like cryptocurrencies. But the rest is basically the same. So wanted to find something that was like one step further into the ecosystem, so that we don't actually have touching any fiat money directly. And then my co-founder Mads, he was one of the largest CryptoKitty breeders back in 2017. I was chatting to him December 2019 saying, hey, I've got some spare time. I'm looking for my next thing. And he sent me a spreadsheet that was kind of floating around amongst some of the big collectors at the time. And it would be, this person owes this person this much, and if they don't repay by this date, then they will send them these NFTs with links to OpenSea for the actual NFTs. So there was like a group of 20 people who were doing this kind of on a trust basis. They knew each other. They shared the spreadsheet, so they're kind of keeping each other honest there. And then Mads had gotten into the NBA Top Shots private beta, which was happening later that year. And he basically wanted some more cash because his girlfriend wouldn't let him spend any more real money on like internet JPEGs. So he had an autoglyph. He wanted to use that as collateral to borrow some ether from me. And then we decided, okay, well, might as well build something that was completely trustless. So then did the first version of the smart contract, did the first version of the dApp, and then did our first public loan in May of 2020. So and that was the first fully trustless NFT-backed cryptocurrency loan on Ethereum.
Wow, that's amazing. So what kind of assets were people trading back then? Like what kind of demand did you see? And then how has that evolved over the next 3 years, I guess, as you kind of expand out? Like I'm someone who's quite deeply involved on the lending side. So interested to hear and like how it started versus how it's got to where it is now.
Yeah, so back then, so Axie was still then on Ethereum mainnet. So there was quite a lot of mythic Axies, quite a lot of CryptoKitties. So lots of founder CryptoKitties, rare CryptoKitties, you know, so you were still getting 20 Ether loans on a founder CryptoKitty at the time. And that was largely because a lot of the people that were in the NBA Top Shots private beta had a lot of CryptoKitties. So we were all in the private beta. You could basically, at that time, you know, they would drop mythic packs and you could basically, you had as much time as you want. So as much money as you had to spend, you could buy. So it was like 25 of us in the first round. And then so the people started maxing out all of their available capital and wanted to buy more. So they would leverage their CryptoKitties to go buy more NBA Top Shots, which worked out really well for them. I think that was quite a good trade for the first 3 to 6 months there. And then start seeing some Trevor Jones, like the original OG art stuff. Yeah, so some Trevor Jones, a lot of art blocks, autoglyphs, CryptoPunks. At that stage, Bored Apes weren't around yet, really, so they only came a little bit later. And then like the whole PFP wave started, and then we started seeing Bored Apes and, you know, all of the other Azukis, those kinds of things. I've like really started picking up. Yeah, it was really like PFPs really was, I think it was an easy thing to understand for people, and not as kind of art. If you're not into art, it's a little bit harder to kind of like get it straight away, I think. But I think PFPs people understood quite well. And then
just to stop you there, Stephen, Legendary has a funny story here on his first loan on NFTfi.
Yeah, because that brought up so much nostalgia with Mythic Axes and the closed-door private beta of Top Shot. And I remember my first loan on NFTfi back then was an artwork by Park, one back in that cycle, one of the most successful artists that actually Park had gifted to me because it was like trolling Park in a friendly way on X. And I did put that on NFTfi because I also needed liquidity for Top Shot back then. And I defaulted on it because I just had put a different time zone in my calendar as a reminder, and I defaulted on that. Then I think back then there was like a small grace period, but I think I wasn't aware of that. And I thought like I lost it, and I checked back like a day later and was like, yep, Park is gone. But in the end, it worked out well because that money that went into Top Shot did significantly better than having kept the Park. But that was my first loan that I ever did. And ever since, I did not default on any other loan except when I wanted to do it on purpose. So I learned my lesson in a profitable way, actually.
Yeah, I think, you know, anybody who was in that private beta for NBA Top Shots, I think did pretty well, right? Like that was, I mean, it was like $250 for a Mythic pack then, right? And then some of those LeBrons. Yeah, you have as much time as you want, and I think some of them were selling for like $120,000 like 3 months later. So it was crazy.
One question on like the type. So we talked about like the different types of assets, how they evolved. What about what the rates were back then? Like my understanding in general for markets is that over time they kind of get more efficient. What type of deals were considered good back then for those premium assets? You mentioned CryptoKitties, you mentioned a couple of other things versus now. Like, how have you seen that market change? What is good for a borrower and lender in the market now?
Yeah, so I think it depends a lot on the actual asset. So back then, everything was new and risky, and you know, like even CryptoPunks, you know, they'd just been around. I think at that time they were about 1.5 Ether between 0.75 and 1.5 Ether. So there was nothing really with any provenance and a history of price. So if you think about it as a lender at that time, you were taking a lot of risk, right? Because you could just as easily have seen CryptoPunks go to 0 as opposed to going to 30 Ether at that time.
Sure.
I think it's different now. So you're already seeing the good assets at that time were probably getting between 40 and 60% APR. The riskier ones up to 80, 120. Now you can pretty easily get a loan on the top tier assets, CryptoPunks, autoglyphs. If you do lower LTV, so 50-ish% LTV, you can get depending on the market between 8 and 12%. I would say is kind of reasonable for the top tier assets if you do lower LTVs. Back then, also, we saw a lot more. It was much easier to get a higher loan on a rare asset than it is right now. So it's like the spreads between the rare and the floors have been compressed quite a bit, and I think even more so in the lending markets, because the liquidity is much thinner on the rare assets. So if you're a lender and you want to flip that quickly to kind of get back into lending, you have to take a bigger hit on the market price if you want to sell it quickly, if it's a really a legendary kind of like super rare asset. So there was a much bigger spread then. Now, so now you still see there's like the newer, riskier assets are still kind of 30 to 60% APRs. There's not many that are over 60%. I think it just becomes too expensive then.
Yeah.
But there's there's a small subset of collections that are sub 20% APRs.
Very interesting. Really, really interesting stuff. Great to have that like additional context on where the market is now versus what it used to be. It makes sense given that the market is definitely more mature now. Maybe one final question for this interview segment, because we're going to have you back in the next couple of weeks, so we'll be able to chat more in general. One thing that is happening in this market right now in a particularly bullish environment is obviously ETH is going up a lot, or people are expecting ETH to go up a lot. So something that I'm working through my head from a lending perspective is it better to lend in ETH versus lending in US? Oh, Stephen just dropped off. You are back with us. Okay, good.
Yes.
So is it better to lend in ETH or is it better to lend in USDC? Like, given your experience and your kind of knowledge on this, what are the factors when people are trying to decide which of those routes to go down?
I think it depends a little bit on the actual lender. So how long are you Ether, right? So if you're just investing your own capital and you think ETH is going up quite a bit, maybe you don't want to swap and go out into USDC. If you're a market maker or somebody a little bit more professional and you've got 30% of your allocation is in stables and you're trying to get the best yield for those stables in their currency, I think it makes a lot of sense to lend. I would also say that there's actually a shortage of USDC liquidity in the market right now for exactly that reason. The bigger funds aren't really like playing in the NFT space yet. Like the attention isn't there. And the individuals who are lending are long Ether, so they kind of just wanting to lend in Ether. So you will get higher APRs on USDC loans than you would get on Ether loans. So I think it depends a little bit on what do you care more about. Do you care more about growth or do you care more about yield? And I think the people that care more about yield, they have an asset mix and they're sitting on stables and they're looking to deploy those for the best yield they can. And if you want to get the best yield on stables, it probably is kind of in the NFT lending side of things, because the worst case, if you get a default, you can still sell that asset. If you're doing a yield farm and that implodes, it could easily go to zero.
Sure. Really, really interesting stuff. That's great additional context for the people who are interested on the NFT lending side of things. We definitely want to talk more about that, and we're very happy. Stephen's going to stay with us for the rest of this show. We're going to get into the headlines now, but we're also going to have him back in the next couple of weeks, so we keep getting some more insight onto the NFT lending side of things. Let's hit the Bitcoin headline, Legendary. We're going to talk Bitcoin. People are happy. It's up another 3%, past 70K again. But there has been a few kind of explanations as to why we might not be going higher. I'm just going to share my screen for the people who are watching in, but I'll read it out for the people who are just in the Twitter spaces on X. So yes, we've got Bitcoin up above 70K. We had a couple of explanations as to what was going on here. I'm going to read them out and then come to you, Legendary, for a bit of a breakdown. OSF shared this earlier. Possible explanation for why Bitcoin is not sending despite massive inflow numbers, because remember, also as part of the snapshot, we reported, I think there was almost $1 billion of inflow into the Bitcoin ETFs yesterday alone. So this is what OSF said. Big increase in Bitcoin open interest and big ETF inflow coinciding suggests to me TradFi people growing that basis trade, long ETF versus short futures. Bitcoin funding is back up to 20% at the moment, so that makes sense. This is a representation of ballpark APR that would be made from this delta neutral trade. What this means is the net inflows, into Bitcoin ETFs aren't always a representation of increase in net risk. You have to look at open interest and funding rates to try to guess a clearer representation. He's written some more stuff. I'm going to stop there because I want to hear Legendary's thoughts on that. Any further thoughts on that, Legendary? Do you think this is something that could be happening?
Yeah, coming from the TradFi world, definitely think that, and we've seen it with a very big institutional player with stats and an explanation on them where everyone was bullish, $1 billion fund moving in, but it was a fund that was very well known for basically mostly assuming only delta neutral positions. And this basis trade that OSF was just describing is like a very, very common thing. You short BTC or whatever asset it is on the future market, you long the stock asset. There's typically a price difference between the spot and the future price. This difference is basically your basis. Say BTC is at 70K, the 3 months future side, I don't know, 74K, then 4K is the basis. And also what is interesting with that, because the overall market is so long right now, the shorting BTC or shorting an asset in a market that is like very, very bullish can actually come with a like positive funding rate. So the earnings that you're making in this trade are coming from the perspective that there's this difference between spot and future price, that basis trade, and also if there's a scenario where there's a positive funding rate, say for your shorts, then you're also earning on that side of things. And the more people are long in the market, obviously, and less people want to be short on that, then you would run into a scenario where you can actually make money on shorting. And it's delta neutral because either BTC goes up, then you make money on your spot long position on BTC. Obviously, is offset by the short losing money, but you still have the price difference. Goes the other way around as well. BTC crashes, then your short is printing, you lose money on your spot position, but you still have the price difference that makes sure that you profit. And it's a strategy that you can do with size. Now that you have the ETFs, there's like a very convenient way for institutional players to come in and buy a shit ton of Bitcoin, but also assume the short position. And that's, I would say, like a very, very accurate description by OSF.
Yeah, I just got another tweet to back that up from Saint Pump, who I started following because I think someone else said that they were very good. They're like one of the top traders on Binance, I think. Said funding is still quite low for all that inflow. Could be some net shorts, but in my opinion, a lot of funds are playing the basis trade. Kind of explained it one more time. Sammy, wanted to come to you here. Any reflections on this? What are your thoughts? Do you think this is what's playing out? Anything else to be aware of as we kind of get over excited about ETF inflows, but clearly the picture is a bit more complex, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult to work out exactly what's going on, but it does make sense. I think just knowing a lot of my clients when I was in TradFi, they would be sort of risk averse, especially if they're dealing with client funds. It's like, well, if you're an asset manager, you're not going to take directional risk. You're literally just going to get your clients to say what they want to buy into, whether it's like ETFs with Bitcoin or whatever, and just taking that in. I don't think that taking directional bets at this stage makes sense. I think you might as well just do a delta neutral trade, reduce that risk, and then manage it that way. I just don't think taking directional bets is in their risk appetite at the moment, especially with the volatility.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And interestingly, speaking to some TradFi people over the weekend here, like you don't need a big return for them to be happy. Like they're just not chasing the kind of numbers that obviously when we take the directional bet to buy Bitcoin at 70, we're thinking, right, is it going to go to 140 at least? Like let's 2x this thing. We can get excited about that. Whereas on the TradFi side of things, you just don't need that type of gain for them to be content. And so if there's some type of interesting trade where they can really hedge their position, I think it makes a lot of sense to them. Stephen, would love to come to you here. You mentioned you're like a very, very early Bitcoin holder, almost holding it as a way to hedge against your own country's debasing currency. What are your thoughts on Bitcoin now, as you've kind of seen it go from how important it was to you then versus now it's become this kind of ETF asset?
Yeah, so I was just about to say, like 20% APR on a delta neutral trade is like that's manna from heaven for the TradFi guys, right? Like
Yeah.
it's almost impossible to get that in traditional markets. I think we're sometimes a bit spoiled, but we're like, oh, like, is there a 5x left in this thing? And if it's not, then we're not going to invest. It's just we're in a different world. So yeah, I mean, so when I bought Bitcoin, I think it was $600. I think when I bought for the first time, and to kind of, and back then the bet really was, well, this is either going to take over the world or it's going to go to nothing. And I think we've kind of crossed that line now of it's not going to go to nothing anymore, right? Like I just can't see a world where that is a very high probability risk. But at the same time, we're still sitting with, what are we on, like 2.5 trillion or something like that, maybe 10 trillion at the end of this cycle. Easy to see that go to 50, 100 trillion in by 2030, right? So you really are now in this, it's probably best risk reward for Bitcoin that there ever was, right? So yes, maybe the crazy returns aren't there, but you also don't have the risk of everything going down to zero. So it's very gratifying to kind of it's almost 10 years later since I first bought, and seeing this world that we were all hoping for becoming a reality. And then I think actually I'm probably even more bullish on the Ethereum ETF, because I just think that is a bigger, it translates to the rest of the market more than the Bitcoin ETF does. You can kind of make a case that Bitcoin is kind of this thing on its own just because of the way it was formed and what it's trying to do, whereas Ethereum is more like the rest of the crypto market, and so kind of having this beachhead of an ETF in like the proof of stake smart contracting platform. I really think that is probably the more bullish thing that I've seen for the entire crypto industry, not just Ethereum.
That's really interesting. Maybe a follow-up question on that, given that you're so early to Bitcoin, being able to see that kind of play out before other people and now thinking this about ETH. Why do you think then that it feels like, at least, that a lot of people kind of moved off ETH this cycle? Obviously, Solana has captured a lot of attention and has its own unique use cases, which are very good for it. But why do you think so many people have shifted away and maybe don't share that opinion that ETH is potentially got even more ETF potential?
Yeah, so okay, so maybe just, I don't know that ETF, like ETH necessarily has more ETF potential.
Sure.
I just think that the ETH ETF is a bigger mark of approval for the rest of the crypto ecosystem than the Bitcoin ETF was. But I think why not? Well, look, I mean, crypto is an attention game, and I think we're still kind of in the player versus player mode right now. So it's all money sloshing around from people who are already in crypto. There's a little bit of money coming in through the Bitcoin ETF, but they're not really going out further onto the risk curve yet. So really, we're not really seeing massive new money coming into the broader crypto ecosystem yet. And I think something that, and this is maybe similar to what I was saying earlier, where, when we see a 20% return, it's like, okay, that's nothing. We're looking for a 5x or a 10x. I think in the, when it comes to like these smart contracting platforms and all the new things that are coming out, I think because we've known what Ethereum is for 6 or 7 years, it's not as mind-blowing to us anymore. But if you think about somebody who's only heard about Bitcoin, maybe heard the term Ethereum, don't really understand what you can do with it, what the power of a kind of global smart contracting platform is, with your guaranteed execution, you can move large amounts of money, you can program ownership. All of Wall Street still needs to kind of have that realization. So I think we're a little bit, it's almost normal to us, and Solana is the cool new thing, but most of the world hasn't heard about that yet. And they're still going to get excited by that story that we got excited about 5 years ago.
That's a really interesting way to frame it, because I think a lot of one of the things, and we're going to have to move on to the next topic in a sec, but my reflection on that is I think people have framed the fact that people don't know about it as a negative because they say that Bitcoin is easier to understand. So therefore that's where all the capital goes. But if you just reframe that and say, well, this is the thing that they still have to find out, wait until they do, then it becomes exceptionally bullish. So I guess you can kind of completely flip it.
Just try think back to when you first, if you already knew about Bitcoin and you're like, oh my God, this is going to change the world. And then you heard about, oh, but you can also program money and you can build new things on top of it. And just think about that aha moment that you had back then. And imagine everybody else who hasn't had that yet, who are going to have that over the next 12 to 18 months.
Interesting way to
I actually find so I have one point on that. Just I find that the Ethereum kind of the notion of Ethereum actually easier to understand than Bitcoin. I think if you look at a lot of these institutions, they're familiar with cash flows, they're familiar with that kind of way of comparing that to a typical investment. And I think Ethereum is a lot closer to that. I think Bitcoin, it's very hard to explain. Okay, well, what's proof of work? What's all this like? It's a hard cap. It's kind of like gold, but I think that ETH is just generally easier for institutions to understand. And I think it's almost more similar to maybe an NVIDIA or tech ETF as opposed to a gold ETF. So I think that it'll be very different in price action, but it'll definitely be interesting to see how the supply dynamics and everything impact that. But it'll be definitely something interesting to watch over the next couple of years.
Yeah. Interesting take. I kind of agree with that. I think they both have their unique props. Right, we want to get into the next headlines, but before we do that, let's hit the Web3 roundup to get you up to speed with everything else that's happened in the last 24 hours, as always, from the snapshot, which is pinned up top. Number one, the Pac-Moon airdrop hit yesterday, and just like clockwork, it surged 17% post-airdrop to reach a now $250 million market cap at an all-time high, or at least it was for a little bit. That team is crushing it. Number two, Pirate Nation, as we mentioned already, announces TG for June the 13th. And the supply is actually going to be much higher than we've become accustomed to. 26% circulating supply for that token when it comes. Next, Thailand approves its first spot Bitcoin ETF. We saw, I think it was Australia yesterday as well, which is pretty cool. Bitcoin ETFs see almost $1 billion of inflow yesterday. We mentioned that too. On the media side, Jesse Pollack appears on Bloomberg to explain the next generation of internet is on Base. I wrote a post yesterday on Twitter about Base and got crazy engagement. That's always a nice proxy for me to gauge where sentiment is. Number two, Gold Bored Ape is to be auctioned at Sotheby's. That'll be interesting to see what price it goes at. And crypto market maker DWF Labs commits $12 million to buy Flocky tokens. We've noticed a bit of a trend of significant institutions or crypto institutions wanting to back meme coins now in some capacity. So that is interesting. Note, we'll keep an eye on that trend in general. We want to get to the final couple of headlines in the last 10 minutes of the show. The second one we touched on was Iggy Azalea's mother coin. Just trying to find the chart here for you. Remember, we had Iggy on the show last week on Wednesday where she appeared, kind of took us by surprise. We did an interview for an hour. That was pretty fun. And her token was much lower than it is now. Some people have suggested her appearance and performance on this show is what turned the token around. I'd maybe stop short of that, but it was very interesting to see. I believe I'm just sharing the chart on screen for the people who are watching in. So I think her appearance on the show, legendary. You could tell me where her appearance was. I think we were down here, right? Down here, 30th of May. Is that about right?
Yeah, that's about right. Yeah, if we do the math, that's about right.
And so since then, it's been a 20x, I think. But not because of her appearance on the show. Interestingly, because she has been absolutely dedicated on the timeline, to be fair. I was sticking up for her on the Thread Guy space I did a couple of days ago, where it's like, you got to hold your hands up sometimes and say, this person's put a hell of a lot of effort into the attention game that you need to play in order to get people's attention, in order to try to be successful with any type of coin. We don't know if it's going to be sustainable or not, but she's certainly giving it an effort at the moment, at a minimum. So huge win there. Just a quick thing on Vitalik's thoughts on the kind of celebrity cycle where we are at the moment. He said this, and this is what I want to hear some responses on. Maybe we'll go to Sammy first because we haven't heard from him in a moment. I'm feeling quite unhappy about this cycle's celebrity experimentation so far. Financialization as a means towards an end, I can respect if the end is worthy, like healthcare, open source, software, or art. Financialization as the final product is not okay. He's got a little emoji with a vomiting. Ashton and Mila's Stoner Cats was vastly more honorable than anything we've seen from this 2024 celebrity meme coin era. At least there was an actual show being funded. He goes on to say, a quick summary of features that a celebrity crypto project needs to have for me to be willing to respect it. Number one, have some kind of public good goal that it's serving other than enriching the celebrity and early adopters. Number two, have some kind of fun mechanics that go beyond just trading a token. As much as I dislike the token voting DAOs, at least they give something for people to do and organize around. And three, make something that lasts 10 plus years rather than bubbling around for a few months and then being forgotten. Strong takes from our leader, Vitalik. Sammy, I want to come to you first here. What are your thoughts? There's a lot to digest there, but how do you want to come in on this?
Probably make reference to his original paper that he wrote on community coins. I think he talked about using them as like a vehicle to raise funds. And I think that's what he's alluding to in terms of, okay, as long as there's some sort of good at the end. And I think if we look at the mother token, that's being used to fund koala sanctuaries in Australia. I think I saw something recently on the timeline. So there is some good coming out of it. I think having spoken to Iggy on the show, she struck me as someone who was here for the right reasons. Now, I don't know, like, obviously without verifying the back channels and stuff, it's hard to verify that. But I do think that she had the right intentions. She's trying to do some good with it. She comes from like a creator's background, understands like the middleman or the agencies take a big cut. So there's something that you could potentially do there in disrupting the music industry. So she has all these ideas. I think it's just a case of implementing them and potentially using the attention that she's got around that token to do good, finding those syncs. And yeah, I mean, there are going to be nefarious actors that are in the space, and you do have to take each celebrity on their own merits. I don't think you can like put one brush paints all of them, because they are individual, and it's the same with any industry. You're going to have bad actors, so it's just a case of like, just take them for their own merits, and then just form your opinions based on that. But I think Vitalik, I mean, yeah, I think reading his paper, it makes sense. Like he's got some good points there, but I don't think you can use it one size fits all.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Stephen, do you have a take on how these celebrities have come to market so far? Any responses to Vitalik's quite strong opinions that like, look, you should kind of be serving something bigger than just your own enrichment? Or would you think like, look, this is a permissionless thing. People are obviously out to make money. Is that fine?
Yeah, it's. I think there's a difference between what I would do versus what I think networks should allow to be done, right? So like this whole, who am I to decide what's okay and what's not, and like where's that line? But so how do I think about those things? So I actually don't know necessarily that like it going to a good cause is like, often it's like good washing, right? So you like, I'm making lots of money, but I'll give 5% to somebody else, and now it's a good cause. I'm actually I would much rather support something where somebody says to me, I'm just here to make money. You might lose a bunch of money. Let's have fun together. I'm more likely to support that than if somebody like, it's clear that they're actually just trying to make money, but I'm also giving, crumbs to somebody else. So that's one. And then I think it's a little bit disingenuous of the space to kind of blame the celebrities, when if you look at what is the thing that's got all the attention in all of crypto Twitter, it's whatever's like making people money for like no reason, right? So it's these hyper financialized social media platforms. It's basic gambling spins that you get for your blast gold. It's just like the meta in the space is just, my number go up, make some money, don't care about fundamentals. Where's the attention? Get out before everybody else gets out, right? So I think saying, oh, these celebrities are coming in, like they're not here for the right reasons, but that's kind of the game everyone's playing right now. But at the same time, you've also got like real development happening. There's real attention. We're like actually starting to scale. User experience now is, I don't know if you guys have seen Blackbird, which is a kind of, it's an app that you use for restaurant loyalty, but it uses cryptocurrencies, but you don't know that you're using cryptocurrencies, right? Like you earn points. Those happen to be a ERC20. You don't need a wallet. You don't need to know about Ethereum. Nothing. So I do think we are kind of in that stage of the market where we're still in the space where we're just an attention game, but I think a lot of stuff is going to launch over the next 6 to 12 months that all of a sudden are usable by the mainstream. And then you'll see some real use cases popping up again.
I think that's completely fair. Interesting takes on both sides of this celebrity stuff, but I think I lean towards this permissionless aspect as well. Also, as you say, a lot of people are here to make the money, so can't necessarily criticize others for doing that. We're not going to spend too long on this celebrity thing now. We've had a much longer conversation on that, so don't shoot the messenger if we haven't covered your exact take on that, because we have to move on for it at the moment. Legendary, I know you might have a celebrity take, but we've only got a couple minutes left for the show. Might want to bring you to your favorite coin, BNB coin, which is up 132% in the year, up another 8%, hitting all-time highs. Do you want to speak to this a little bit? It's now the second major to hit all-time high, and I just feel like people would not have expected that at all. What are your thoughts there?
It's not only the second major to hit all-time high, it also had surpassed 100 bill in market cap, which is insane. Just to put that into a reference frame, Solana is at 80 bill, Tether is at 112, ETH is at 450-ish. So it's insane by any metric, and I still think that it doesn't really get the love on the European or American side of the timeline.
Sure.
Again, the use case that I right now see most often, and I also use it myself and see or hear a lot of whales using it, is just to farm the Binance launch pools with it. For all the token launches. And I do think in a world where we'll still see ZK Sync, Layer 0, and some of the biggest, most anticipated airdrops for this year, or for either the upcoming month, or then maybe some more after the summer break in the second half of the year, that quite a few of those are to be expected to launch on the Binance launch pool. And I just think that the price action in general, not that specific pump yesterday, to that I can't speak, but the price action in general is also a bit of a reflection on the returns on the launch pool and on the upcoming airdrops that people are still anticipating.
Okay, excellent quick answer, and I appreciate that succinct one because we're running out of time. Can you just maybe touch on this quickly, Legendary? As always, I was doing some investigating in the comments to find out the real truth, and this was some interesting responses I found to a question. Can someone please explain why BNB is over $700? This came from Ansem and Kobe, where Ansem said, Kobe said it's because because CZ has all of the supply and he very obviously cannot sell it. And then the second point that Kobe made, I think, was more in line with what you're saying, where they pay a dividend basically by requiring 10% of new Binance launch tokens to launch pool or whatever it's called. So insiders just cash out via dividends instead. Pretty goated, actually. Huge beneficiary of high FD meta, maybe the biggest. Do you want to comment on those particular two things? I don't know how much information is public on those specific things. Any thoughts there before we close out?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the launch pool and you see that you have a return of typically 2% on your BNB stash on that, and you don't need to sell that, and we've had 52-ish launch pool tokens so far, then you can just ride that token and get the value out of the airdrops and sell them off. And the higher the FTV, obviously, the higher your return on that. So if you can't sell your BNB for whatever reasons, you can still get a nice dividend on that and have your BNB locked. So that could definitely be the case, and it's definitely benefiting the price action as well. Yeah.
Okay. That is interesting to note. But look, guys, we've run out of time for today's show. Hope you enjoyed it as always. Thank you to my legendary co-hosts, Legendary and Sammy, for hosting me. Thank you so much for joining us. Stephen, thanks for joining us as well. You're going to be back with us a couple of times. Have you found it? And where can we keep up to date with what's going on with you?
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun. Looking forward to the next one. You can find me on Twitter on Stephen, STEPHEN _YO, or you can check out NFTfi at NFTfi on Twitter. So looking forward to seeing you guys in the Discord. There's a link to the Discord over there.
Amazing. Looking forward to continue the conversation, Stephen. It's been great to have you with us, getting that additional insight onto everything on the NFT lending stuff, and frankly, just being in crypto for longer than some of us. So that's really, really interesting to hear your insights. Guys, that's the end of the show. We hope you enjoyed it. Remember, we do this every single day, Monday to Friday, 7 a.m. Eastern time, 12 p.m. BST, every day of the week. We're live on X. We're live on YouTube as well. We'll see you again tomorrow. Have a wonderful day. Take care and goodbye.